and welcome to this new session of our garagErasmus Academy Plus 2020. Today we are going to talk with an Erasmus alumnus, Giorgio, who is already here with us. Giorgio has a very interesting profile and a lot of experience in the fields of higher education and NGOs. So first of all, Giorgio, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me being here.
And it's a pleasure also for me to be here to talk with you. Giorgio is the manager for higher education and internationalization at the International Association of Universities. Before we start, I would like to remind to our audience that there will be a moment towards the second part of our session when you will be able to directly ask questions to Giorgio, and we will try to address as many as we can. But before we get to that, I would like to talk a bit more about Giorgio's story, because I introduced him very shortly, but there is actually a lot more to unpack about his story. I know he already had plenty of international experiences, both as a student and then as a professional. And I would like Giorgio to tell us how he got where he is now.
Okay, thank you very much, Marco. First of all, let me thank garagErasmus for giving me this very interesting possibility of being here with all of you today. It's a pleasure. I see that we are starting even a little bit in advance, but people will come, so we will have time. We have 1 hour, so we will also have time for questions and answers, which is always very important. So thank you very much to garagErasmus for having me here, and also thank you very much to Marco, who will lead this discussion, this kind of interview. So my name is Giorgio Marinoni, and I was born in Milan, in Italy, as you can easily recognize from my accent, where I have studied. And as a student, I studied chemistry. So I graduated in chemistry. At that time, I'm old enough to be pre-Bologna reform. So I studied for 5 years. And immediately after graduating, I moved out of Italy to do a doctorate abroad. So in a way, my first experience, as Marco said, was officially a student experience, because the doctorate is still considered formation period, but it was already at the doctoral level. And maybe I could tell a little bit more about this later on. And I went for 1 year in Amsterdam, at the University of Amsterdam, where I did my first year of PhD. And then I came back to Italy and I continued my PhD. But while I was doing my PhD, I started volunteering for a student organization, which some of you might know because it's called Erasmus Student Network, especially people who are in Europe and have done the Erasmus program might know it. And while I was volunteering for this student association, I got more and more involved, up to the point that at a certain moment, I had the occasion of candidating as president of the European Association. And I took that occasion and I moved to Brussels for 1 year. At the beginning was just an idea of moving there for 1 year, and then I would see where my life will bring me. But I really like this word of higher education, this word of non-governmental organization. So after that experience, I came back again to Italy, but I start looking for a job in the field of higher education. So I kind of did a transition from my original scientific background as a chemist to move more to a background in higher education and NGOs. And I moved back to Brussels for a second time. Sorry, I didn't tell you, but Erasmus Student Network is based in Brussels, in Belgium. So I moved back to Brussels, where I completed my change of career, if you want, and I found a first position at a network of universities, which is called UNICA, the network of universities in the capital of Europe, and I was a project manager there. And I stayed there for 5 years at UNICA. And then, for personal reasons, I decided to move out of Brussels and to move to Paris, where I'm living right now. While working at distance, also, this is something interesting, because especially in this period that we are living into, we are speaking a lot about distance learning, working at distance and everything. So I already had an experience when it was not so common. It was something not yet common. And then I was also looking for a job, because it's always easier to live and work in the same city than working in a different city where you're living. And after 1 year, I found the present position I'm having, which is, as Marco said, manager for higher education and internationalization at the International Association of Universities. And I'm there for 5 years now. Yes, something like 5 years. Yeah, I'm there for even more. Just to give you a little bit of what is the International Association of Universities and what is my position, so you can understand better with whom you're speaking. The International Association of Universities is an international non-governative organization, which is based inside the UNESCO building in Paris, but is independent from UNESCO. That's been created by UNESCO back in 1950, so it's an initiative of UNESCO, but it's independent from UNESCO because it wants to be an independent voice for higher education, so not related to governments. And inside this, it's an association of universities, so we have members which are universities in all parts of the world, in all continents of the world. And as any NGO, you have a board of elected representatives who are rectors or vice rectors of universities, and then you have a secretariat who is in charge of putting into action the work plan. And among the main priorities of the association, there is also internationalization of higher education, of course, which is the area I am responsible for.
Okay, thank you very much. I would actually like to bring you back for a moment to your doctorate, your PhD, because in my mind, and I think in most people's mind, a PhD is mostly a step that you need to take in order to become yourself a teacher, to start a career as an educator yourself, while you actually went on and did something entirely different. You took this PhD, but then moved on to find a job in an NGO. I was wondering if you see yourself as an exception, or if you think that this is actually a legitimate path that people could take into account to do a PhD and then move on to find a job in a business sector or an NGO or something that is not, hard education.
Yes, absolutely. This is a very interesting question. Actually, at the time that I started doing a PhD, I enrolled in a PhD because I wanted to be a researcher. So that was my idea at the time. I didn't enroll in a PhD at the time because I thought it might be useful in the future. And to be sincere, due to my path, I didn't even finish my PhD. So I didn't complete it because then, as I told you before, my life evolved and I had other opportunities which were to work in the field of NGOs. But if I'm looking back right now and replying to the question, that very important question that you posed, Marco, about if now somebody has to decide to do a PhD only because he wants to do research or only because he wants to do an academic career, then my reply would be absolutely no. And if you're asking me, do you regret having started a career having enrolled in a PhD and having spent part of your life for a PhD that you didn't even finish? So it might seem that you just waste your time. And again, my answer would be no. And why? Because I think the importance of doing a PhD, it's really that gives you a perspective and a mentality of conducting research. So you get a lot of skill and competencies which will be absolutely important no matter what kind of job you will do. So I see myself in my present job, I am thankful of things that I have learned during my PhD experience, even if I'm doing something that has nothing to do with the subject of my research in chemistry. Nothing to do. But so I would say that nowadays, especially after the the Bologna reforms in Europe and all over the world, I mean, the importance of having a PhD and doing a PhD goes much beyond the fact of a career in research, a career in academia. It's really something that is really highly valuable and valued by companies all over the world, and gives you really a boost in your career other than being a very interesting experience. So yes, definitely I would recommend people who are interested, and not only for staying in academia. Actually, very few people at the end of the doctorate right now are staying in academia. It's very difficult. The career in the academic career is very difficult. It's getting more and more complicated because there are more and more people who are doing a PhD. But even if you don't enter in academia, as I said, even I'm speaking to somebody who has not even finished his own PhD. So it's really something useful, and it's an experience that has been very valuable for me. So I would definitely recommend anybody who would like to do it to go for it.
Yes, and I absolutely agree that some skills and a mindset that you get while doing that are very useful in whichever path you choose later on. I think it's the same principle that we see with people just, you know, getting a degree in a field and then starting to work in another field. I think what really matters is that you can show that you are able to follow a task from start to finish, and you have the right mindset to get along with your projects.
Yes. May I add something? A lot of recruiters right now, one things that are looking at are the so-called soft skills. So the soft skills are skills like organizational skills. Are you able to organize yourself? Are you able to organize work? Communication skills. Are you able to express yourself? Are you able to speak with people? So all these kind of things go beyond the specific field that you have studied. So are things that you learn in any possible field of study, and you learn through experience. So I definitely agree with you, Marco. This is something very important, even if you study in one field and then you end up working in another one.
Yes, and I actually think this is going to become more and more important in the job market, especially as we're seeing so many tasks being actually replaced by software. What really separates, I think, humans from software is the ability to be well-rounded individuals with, you know, the ability to take on different tasks. And I agree that the soft skills are really what you want to have in your CV in order to stand out from the crowd. Speaking about standing out from the crowd, I wanted to ask you about volunteering, because you briefly touched upon it being a big part of your life, I would say. I'm sure it gave you a lot as an individual from a personal point of view. I was wondering if you also saw it, or if you see it now as an added value from the professional point of view as well.
Absolutely. I mean, as I said before, I'm old enough to have lived in an educational world, especially in Italy at that time, which was completely different from the educational world right now. So the world of university, the idea itself of going to the university and doing something, when I started university, was still very traditional, in the sense you go to the university. In Italy was even, you go to the university in the same place where you have done your high school, then you graduate there, you study in your field, you just study, you do nothing else than study. So I mean, for instance, I did chemistry for 5 years. You try to graduate as soon as possible, so you concentrate yourself just on studying, and then when you will finish your studies, you will get your degree and you will go to the world of work. So that was the idea when I started the university. But I realized already at the time that I was doing the university that the world had completely changed. So that idea was out of the market, completely out of the market. So I had to realize that the job market was asking for something completely different, which nowadays you see it. I mean, all the students at the university, nobody will do what I did because that would make absolutely no sense. But the more you do, the more job experience you have during your studies. So stage, volunteering, a lot of different experience, the better it is, because you are much more prepared already for the world of work. So the transition from the world of studies to the world of work, it's something that goes together during your studies. So I think every student nowadays already know that. At my times, I discovered it in a way. So, and I start doing volunteering, not with this idea of getting a benefit out of it, because at that moment was not the normal way. So I started because I said, okay, something nice, and maybe I will even have fun doing that. And then while doing it, I realized, first of all, that I like it very much, even if it was very demanding in time. And the more I like it and the more time was demanding. But I realized that it was giving me opportunities of learning and doing things that I never thought I would be able to do, or that could be useful for my job. And I can make a very easy example. So I was working, as I said, in the association, and as every association, you need to write a budget and to write a financial report at the end of the year. Never studied anything about economy, but if you are the president of the association, you are the responsible. Okay, you have somebody who is the treasurer, but at the end you are the responsible. So if there is something wrong with the finances, you are the one to blame. And so you have to understand what's going on. And that was very interesting, because I started studying a bit of accounting and try to understand, okay, how do you create a budget? How do you do a financial report? All these kind of things. And that I do it as a volunteer in volunteering. And when I start working in NGOs, in Brussels, for instance, at Unica, and I start managing projects financed by tenders of the European Commission, of course you have to write budgets. Of course you have to write financial reports. And I knew that I had that capacity because I learned it while volunteering. So, I mean, that's really, I would say it's not only a soft skill, but you can even say it is an hard skill that you are getting in a context which is completely different, that I never thought about it. I never thought it could be useful for me. But in my job, then I realized that I had a huge advantage, and that was brought by my experience as a volunteer. If you want, Marco, I have another example of volunteering, which was very interesting, if I have the time.
Please.
Another things that I learned while being a volunteer in Erasmus Student Network, it's the capacity of communicating between different cultures and different nationalities, which again was something that I didn't think at all at the moment. But as Erasmus Student Network is an international network based in different countries, there were at moments meetings, working meetings of all the different countries. So you met with different people from all over Europe. And there I start realizing that different cultures, different nationalities, they don't all think in the same way. But that's normal. I mean, there is nothing right, nothing wrong. It's simply that sometimes people see something from one side and other people see it from the other side, but both approaches are good. And I realized that, but everything that I thought until now, it's not the only truth. It's not the only way of interpreting something. So that was something that gave me this capacity, which nowadays that I'm working in an international organization with all over the world. I mean, I'm working with people from Japan to Argentina to South Africa. This is something that you really realize, that the way of approaching, the way of solving problems, and the way of communicating between people really depend on your cultural background, and being able to understand the differences between the different cultural backgrounds. It's something very important. Again, something that I learned through my volunteering, and that at the time I was not thinking about learning because it could be useful, but which is absolutely useful in my present day.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you said. It's true that especially if you want to work in an international context, you need to be aware that we don't all come from the same place, from a mental point of view, as well as from a geographical point of view. So you need to be aware of the fact that you can do the same thing in different ways, and you need to communicate with people in different ways and take into account their background. And I also wanted to say one more thing that I thought about while hearing you talk about your experience as a volunteer and how it taught you some very useful skills. I think many people who are starting their career struggle with the fact that, you know, many entry-level entry-level positions ask you to have some kind of experience already. And the dilemma is always how to get experience if you're not allowed to get a job. And volunteering can probably be a great way to mind this gap, to collect some useful skills and useful experience that you can show off also in your CV and prove that you already know how to work in a team and how to get things done. So I think that is a very important thing, and it's entirely in line with what you said. If you agree, now I would like to look at the elephant in the room. I think most of our audience here are here to learn about how the pandemic that is currently going on is affecting the job market. What is your point of view? What do you see happening, and what do you expect to happen? And particularly from the point of view of someone who's trying to enter the job market now and to start a career now.
Yeah, knowing what's going to happen, you need to be a wizard at the moment. Yeah, unfortunately, we are living in a really, really uncertain situation. It's very complicated to see how the pandemic will evolve and how long will take to come to a new normal. I cannot even say come back to the previous normal, because probably we will never come back to the previous normal. One day we will probably have a vaccine and we will be able to arrive to a new normal. I'm not an expert of the whole job market, and I don't pretend to be. So I can speak more about how the job market related to international organization, and especially related to higher education, it's probably going to change, or has already changed. In terms of general, I think it's a bit general. This one I can kind of say that it's general. Of course, at the moment, the job market, it's a bit blocked, because in a time of uncertainty, in a time that you don't know what will come next, the first reaction of everybody is to wait. And this one, of course, it's not a good news. It's not a good news for somebody who's looking for a job, but it's the reality. So it wouldn't be fair if I would tell you that, no, it's going to be easy to find a job, especially in this present moment. Moreover, what we are expecting, and we are already seeing it, it's an economic crisis coming up. And in times of economic crisis, you know, unemployment raises. So the job market, the perspective for the job market immediately are not so good. But this does not mean that the future is just dark and everything is bad. Because every time that you have a crisis, you also have opportunities. So sooner or later, the crisis will end, and then people who are ready to get the opportunities will be the real winners. So the most important message in general, before going to the detail of the world of non-governative organization and higher education in particular, is don't waste your time at the moment. So if you are looking for a job, you cannot look for a job 24 hours per day. And if you are not getting a job right now, you have to think that also the situation is complicated. So you don't have to get demoralized. You don't have to think, oh, it's my fault, because the situation, it is complex. But you can also think, okay, it might take longer than usual, because the situation, as I said, it's uncertain, it will evolve, but you can use this time to improve yourself, to do other things that you have not done, you wouldn't have done otherwise. So you can maybe study something else. You can follow some short courses. You can prepare yourself, try to get other competencies that you don't have. Be prepared for the evolving job market. Try to be creative also, because in times of crisis, creativity, it's a very important asset. So yeah, definitely the situation, it's not good. It wouldn't be fair to say the situation is good, but you will become at a certain moment. There will be a change. In terms of the specific job market and the world of international organization, yeah, the situation even there, it's even worse than not good, because as I said, there is probably an economic crisis. If I'm looking at my association, or we are an association of universities, so we are dependent on our members, which are universities, but the universities might face a financial crisis because of the COVID crisis. And so they might not want to, or even have the opportunities to still remain engaged at the global level, at the international level. Why? Because it's normal when you have a crisis in your house, you're thinking about, okay, I need to solve the problems at home before looking outside. But actually, even if this is reasonable, especially as a first reaction, we have to think that, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, this is a global crisis. And if we want to solve a global crisis, we have to find a global solution, because it will be impossible to solve a global crisis with national and local solution. So the importance of collaboration and international collaboration will increase in the future, has to increase in the future, if we want to go out from the actual crisis. So again, an immediate future which might be challenging, but a long-term future that could be very interesting and very important in the world of international organization, because international organization can bring the solution to the crisis. In the world of higher education, it's a bit the same. Higher education institutions were caught in a way by surprise, and they were obliged from the day to the next day to find a solution for all the students to continue education, to continue research. And what they did was extraordinary, actually, because there was a shift to online education in a very short time. But we know that online education has limitation of access, has limitation of quality. So, I mean, there are a lot of challenges for the next years. For instance, there is a big debate in the world of higher education. Are we going to move everything online? Are we be able to have face-to-face teaching again? So there also, the world of work inside the institution might change. Maybe there will be a new figure, professional figure will be needed. More online education, you need more people expert in online education. The figure of teacher will change. I mean, teachers will have to be trained in teaching online, which is completely different than teaching face-to-face. So again, a challenge and an opportunity at the same time. For somebody who wants to start working at a university, start work to be a teacher, might think about, okay, but what will be the future of teachers, for instance? How online education will impact the figure of teachers? So all these kind of things, my advice would be, there is always one side and another side in a crisis. There is a negative side, but there is always an opportunity side, because a crisis is changing things and it's bringing new things. So that would be my advice for somebody who wants to start a career in the world of education, of higher education at the moment.
Yes, I totally agree with this, and there are some things that you say that are particularly interesting, and I wanted to stress them again. That, as you said, it's not your fault if you don't find a job right now. It's important to be patient and to be aware that the crisis is affecting every one of us. So you need to be a bit more patient than usual. You cannot expect to find a job right out of the gates. It's important to be in the right mindset, be aware that it might not be very fast. It's more of an endurance test. You need to prepare yourself for, let's say, the long run, even though, of course, the hope is that the situation will evolve very quickly, but you need to be prepared for the fact that it might take a bit more. And it's important, as you said, to use this time wisely. Don't panic, don't stress. Try not to focus just on finding your next job opportunity, but also on building your skills and your CV. And I would like to tie this together with something that you said later on about the field of higher education and that of NGOs. That, as you said, new roles will arise and some existing roles will maybe change very much. So I think something important that people can do is try to imagine, as you said, what the teacher of tomorrow will need and work now to build the skills that are needed for those profiles. Because in the end, of course, as you said, no one has a magic wand to know today what will be the future, but it's possible, it's still possible if you think about it to anticipate what the tendencies will be, and you can make sure that you will be ready for when the time comes. One more thing I wanted to ask you about, because I imagine that many people in our audience are interested in starting an international career. Historically, I think one of the biggest issues with someone who wanted to start an international career was that you can hardly find a job in a country different from the one where you are currently living. Generally speaking, it's an advantage if you are already in the city where the job you're applying for is, because of course, at a very short notice, you can go and have an interview, you can have a personal contact that, I mean, a video interview just doesn't give the same impression of a person. I think the current situation is changing the playing field substantially, because now that physical interviews are made impossible, maybe people who are applying remotely are not at a disadvantage anymore. Do you think that can be the case? Do you think this can make things a bit easier for someone who wants to start an international career?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I would say so, and especially if you are looking for a job in an international organization that is receiving a lot of application, because that's what is happening. And especially if you are receiving a lot of application from all over the world, and especially in a time like this one, when traveling is complicated, when financing are also restricting, then the easiest is really to do interviews online. We know that doing an interview online, it's not the same as doing an interview face-to-face, but sometimes that's the only solution an organization can have. So I would say that especially at this present moment, more and more organizations, especially NGOs, will recruit through online interviews. And this is kind of breaking down the competitive advantage that was absolutely existing and was absolutely true of somebody being already in the place, because it's always easy. And one thing, there is one caveat which is important. You have to think about the law of the job market. For instance, I mean, I'm European, so I can make an example from Europe, which is easy. In Europe, especially in the European Union, you have the free movement of professional, of workers. So if you are an Italian and you want to go and work in Sweden, you wouldn't have any disadvantage compared to Swedes. But if you are coming from outside Europe, then the law is kind of putting you in a disadvantage, because the procedure that the employers have to do to recruit you instead of recruiting a European are much more complicated. So it's something that you have to see. There is a disadvantage, but this does not mean that it's impossible, because if I'm taking my own association as an example, we recruited a Georgian. She was a girl, she was not from the European Union, she was the best candidate, even if for us it was complicated, even costed more money, she was the best candidate, so we recruited her. So there is always hope, and it doesn't mean that if you are from outside one country or outside one economic space, you cannot get a job. But it's true that it's in some countries is more complicated than others. But in this present condition, I would say that there is the advantage of having more and more online interviews. Yes, I agree with you, Marco.
Yeah, but I also agree with you that it's important to still take into account the legal frameworks and the fact that, you know, movements might be more tightly regulated than it was in the past. So there is, I mean, it's not as difficult, but it's still not as easy as if you were already in the same city. So everything needs to be taken into account. One more question about this, about having international experiences, because I assume that many people in our audience have had the experience of having a student exchange, so to be abroad for a certain period of time. Is there any difference between this type of experience and when you move abroad as a professional with the intention to start a career in another country?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, based on my experience, absolutely. First of all, if you are moving for a period, you already know you are coming back. So your approach to life in your host country, you know, it's temporary. So you like to profit and discover it, but at the end, you don't really care about really knowing all the details of the countries. And even if you don't integrate, then it depends also how long you're staying in that country. If you're just like for 6 months or 1 year, it's typical like of the exchange students that many of them, they make easily friends with other exchange students, and they don't make so many friends with the local students because they are just kind of a group that they enjoy, and they know that after some months they will leave. But that's a pity, first of all. I mean, it would be much better if you try to integrate already when you are moving for a short period. If you're moving professionally, usually you move with an unlimited horizon. I mean, sometimes you can move professionally for a limited amount of time because your company is sending you to another location. But if you're really looking for a position and you are hired by a company, an organization in another country, you know that, you know, when you leave, you don't know how long you will stay there, if you will move again, you don't know it simply. And there the perspective is completely different. Because you really have to restart your life in the new country. So you are in a way forced to try to integrate more in the reality of your host country. And it's more complicated also because if you are moving in the framework of an exchange program, there is a lot of support. You have a lot of support you receive. But when you move alone, to find a job, and you find a job, you're completely alone. So the experience, it's difficult. It's you really have a lot of things that you have to face yourself with less help than in an organized framework. So at the beginning, especially, it's not easy, but at the end, it's much more rewarding because you really enter in the culture of your host country. So again, the advice would be, don't get depressed at the beginning and don't think that everything will be easy and getting nicely done after a few months. No, there will be moments of discomfort, and sometimes even you might get homesick. But if you really want to move, then you have to believe, and then if you decided to go in that country for that position, it's because there is something that attracts you. And at the end, if you really want to stay there, then you really enjoy, and you will manage.
Yeah, that is a very interesting thing to point out to our audience, because indeed the perspective is very different, and you need to be prepared to the idea of changing your life substantially. I would now like, if it's okay for you, to open the floor to the questions from our audience. There are already a few that started flowing in. Guys, we are not going to answer all of them because, for example, I don't think Giorgio feels comfortable telling you about what is going to happen in the stock market. I would rather focus on questions.
I don't think you would like to do what I will tell you. I don't think you will become millionaire.
Indeed. But there are some interesting ones about your areas of expertise. So we'll start from those. And of course, if you guys have other questions, keep them coming. So the first one comes from Carolina Lisi, who asks us, how hard is it to get a position into an association like the IAU, and what type of study path would you consider as the most appropriate?
How hard it is? How hard it is to find a job in any place? It might be very hard, it might be very easy. In the sense, it might be hard. For instance, the International Association of Universities, in the secretariat, we are 15 people. So we are small, we are a small team. So the opening of position, it's not something that happens every day. So you might have months or even years that are no position opening. So then it's hard because the offer it's low. And second of all, they might be very specialized. You might want to come to work at the International Association of Universities, but the only position open is for a secretary or somebody taking care of the database. And then, of course, that's not the job you want to do. So, and this, I think it's general for all the NGOs. So the availability of position, it's not huge. So, it is hard in that sense. But on the other hand, you might have also the proper profile for a certain type of position. And when you have an opening like that, you might be the right person at the right time. I would say that in general, in the world of work, it's not a matter if you are good or bad. It's a matter if you are the right person at the right moment at the right time. And in my example, for instance, when I found this position, and even when I found the previous one, it happened to me that I was the right person at the right moment at the right time. But in my life, I was many times not the right person, many times the right person, but was not the right moment. And so you don't have, as Marco said before, it's unfortunately looking for a job is something that you don't know how long will it take. It might be very easy because you find a position, you apply, and you get it. And it might take long because for a reason or another, there is a candidate who is more appropriate than you because has a better experience than you. Or sometimes one thinks that it's really annoying when you are looking for a job. Sometimes you are overqualified in the sense that you are applying for a position, but your employer sees that that position will be boring for you. So you might stay in that position for 6 months, but after 6 months, you would like to leave. And of course, employers don't want to employ overqualified people because they will get bored. They will not like their job. Of course, from the candidate perspective, because I live both situations, the candidate perspective would say, but I need a job. I want it. I don't care if it's boring. I will do it for a while, but please don't don't say no to me. But on the other hand, you see also, if we are an employer, you see that people that do that, especially if they are good people, at the first occasion, they will find something better. They will leave. So the employer will have to restart the procedure. Field of study, it really depends. I mean, if I'm looking inside the NGOs where I work, well, me, I am an extreme case. I study chemistry, nothing to do with the job I'm doing. I would say it doesn't matter so much. It matters much more the experience you have. As I said, not only if you have previous professional experience, but what we said before, what are your skills? What are your competencies? So it doesn't matter you have studied economy. It matters you know how to create a budget. It matters you know how to manage finances. It doesn't matter you have studied business administration to manage a project. It matters you are able to do project management. All like that, you know? And a lot of these competencies, you will learn them through experience, not only in your field of study, but during stage, during volunteering. So to me, what I saw in my personal experience and also the experience of people I'm working with, I work with, the experience, the professional experience is much more important than your background. I mean, your academic background is good, especially as an entry point, and especially for some type of job, of course. You cannot, if you want to be to work in a chemical company, and you studied literature, that's quite difficult to work. But a lot depends, especially in the world of international organization. I wouldn't say you study something specifically to go and work in an international organization.
I see. I also liked very much the point you made about the fact that sometimes you may actually be overqualified for a position, because I think it's a good way to also let our audience know that sometimes it doesn't really matter how many positions you apply, but it's maybe more important to select the ones that are right for you and maybe spend more time on an application and do it well, rather than apply to 5 different jobs. Because in the end, as you said, as an employer, you're looking for the right candidates, not just for a candidate, because you might get hundreds of applications. And I guess you want to be the one who really stands out and not the first one to send it, or yeah. I totally agree with that. And I actually wanted to build on Carolina's question because, well, you told us already that you consider soft skills to be more important in the end than the study path that someone chose, generally speaking, of course. I was wondering though, if I intend to work in an NGO, what matters more between soft skills and the ability to show the employer that you are very motivated for that specific position? For example, if I'm applying for an NGO that works to, I don't know, improve the conditions of animals in zoo, does it matter more that I have the soft skills to manage projects, or should I focus more on proving that I care about this and that I maybe already did something in this area?
If you try to work in an NGO that works with the welfare of animals and you never had any experience with animals, you will not even get to the interviews, because what recruiters look at, it's what kind of experience do you have on your CV. So yes, the experience is fundamental. I mean, if you want to work in an NGO that works in education, you need to show that you know the field, and that's fundamental. And that one, you see it already in your CV. So if you don't have that experience from your studies, you might have it through other channels, as I said before. But you need, I mean, when I moved from chemistry to the world of higher education, so when I found my first job, paid job, in the world of NGOs in higher education, I show my experience that I got through a student association which was working in higher education. So the experience, it's fundamental. I mean, as I said before, me as a chemist, if I try to apply to Greenpeace, probably I would never get that job, you know? So the experience is fundamental. But said that, more than the experience, the knowledge of the subject. I mean, and then that's what the university gives you. I mean, if you study something at a university because you want to be knowledgeable in your subject. So usually when you choose a path of studies, you want to be an expert in your field. And that's what the university gives you. Not the only thing, but that's the main. Said that, of course, the motivation is very important. And if you are not motivated, if you are writing a motivation letter to get a job, and already at the time you're writing the letter, you yourself, you don't know what to say, that's a waste of time, because you will not you don't want that position. I mean, you're doing it maybe because you are desperate, but as Marco said, that's wrong. I mean, that's really a waste of time, because you have to prove both. You have to prove that you are knowledgeable in the subject, but also that you really want that position and why you want that position, why you want to work, why I want to work as the manager for internationalization at the International Association of Universities, why I want that position, because I can travel around the world. Might be, but I cannot tell that to the recruiter because they will not get me. No, because I like the subject. I think the subject is important. I think it's something absolutely necessary in the world of education, international collaboration, and because I know that thanks to my experience, I can bring a difference and I can bring an added value to the organization. These are the absolutely necessary things when you are applying for a job.
Yes, and I like it very much how you put it about the motivation letter. I think it's really a moment of truth, where if you're writing a motivation letter and you're struggling to find a motivation to put in your letter, that means that you will probably not be motivated at all when you find yourself in the job. So save yourself the time and save it to the HR people as well, because it's probably not a good match. So move on to something that suits you a bit better. The next question comes from Altin Isaku. I hope I read your name in the right way. Pardon me if I didn't. How can volunteering shape your character?
Very good question. I like it. It does. It does. It does. Take an example from my experience. I was not a patient person at all. Actually, I was very impatient. And then when you start working with a lot of people and you realize that not everybody thinks the same as you, and sometimes there are situations that might get on your nerves, but you need to manage those situations and you need to become more patient. So it does a lot, and that it's something that I changed in my character, that you have to, I learn how to learn more, to listen more to people, to be more patient. If somebody doesn't agree with me, not to tell him, listen, this is completely wrong, even if that's what I'm thinking, but try to understand why he thinks in a different way, what he wants to say. He might be wrong, he might be right. So, and you have to you change your way of approaching, you start thinking, and you put yourself also in the position of self-evaluating and saying, wait a minute, maybe he's right, maybe I never saw that in that way. Maybe if I see it in that way, I can learn something, and maybe I can I can even do it better than I did it before. So yes, volunteering does shape your character, and in a positive way, I would say.
I totally agree. We have a couple more questions that I find very interesting on the topic of volunteering. We have Christina Asguro who's asking us, I would like to ask for suggestions on how I can volunteer remotely for an NGO. Do you have any suggestions on
volunteering remotely? Yes, you can, of course, definitely you can. Depends also on the specific projects that an NGO have, but an easy one. I mean, it might not be your case because you might not be somebody working on IT, but every NGOs need a website, needs a mailing list. So we had volunteers who were working to create these kind of things, and they could live wherever. I mean, we had people who were able to create these technical platforms, and they didn't have to be present. They could live completely in a different country. Nowadays, another thing, you can be a trainer. I mean, a lot of NGOs are looking for trainers, and they are doing more and more training online, webinars like this one. You don't have to be in the same place where the organization is based. You can be everywhere in the world. You have the right skills, you have the right competencies, you can be a trainer online. So yes, you can do something at distance, absolutely.
Yeah, and I agree that particularly now, the physical barrier of being in different places don't really apply anymore. What really matters if you are interested in doing something, because in the end, when you're volunteering, there are no legal boundaries, because in the end, there is not a contract binding you with the association. There is just your will to contribute to their mission. So as long as you have this and a computer, you can help them out. Another question about volunteering from Sabahat Yaved asks, I would like to know how one can showcase volunteering, their volunteering experience in the best way on their CV or on platforms like LinkedIn.
CV, the shortest, the better. You can put your volunteering experience, and you can treat them as your other job experience. And the most important thing, you have to show what you accomplished. So an example, take my example. I was president of my local session of Erasmus Student Network in Milan. Okay, nice. Maybe the employer doesn't even know what it is. But then I write, okay, I increased the budget of the session from 5,000 to 30,000 euros per year. I increased the number of volunteers from 5 to 35, and these kind of things, so you show what you have done as a volunteer and what were your achievements. And this is something that even in a volunteering experience gets the attention of the recruiter.
So you can treat it like an actual professional experience, and
yes,
use it to highlight what you achieved. So
yes, you can treat it like a professional experience, but you have to say that it's a volunteering experience, of course.
Of course,
you cannot fake it is a job, but you say it's a volunteering experience. But the way you present it, it's exactly, and especially because you can change. Actually, it's something useful to slightly change your CV based on the position you're applying for. So if you have done different volunteering experiences, and try to find the ones, and especially the things you have done during a volunteering experience, which are more pertinent to the job you're applying for. I take the example of before. If I'm applying for a job where it's important to have the skill of team building, then I will highlight that I took my volunteer association with 5 people and I brought it to 35 because I created this. And the budget, that's not something very interesting, so I will not highlight it. So this is something you can switch between one job application and another.
Okay. The next question comes from Eleni Krinska, who is asking us, what do you regret the most in the past in terms of professional decisions? What mistakes would you advise us to avoid? And what could you advise us to do from your knowledge, from your point of view?
Professional experiences, huh? What I regret the most. I think I did one of the easy mistake, looking for all possible jobs and try to get a job as soon as possible. So getting stressed, sending too many applications, applying for jobs which were absolutely not interesting for me and where I didn't get any opportunity to get them. This is absolutely wrong. First of all, because you don't get the job, and second, because you get depressed. Because the more you apply for jobs and the more you don't get, you start questioning yourself. So I'm not valuable. There is something wrong with me. But actually, you at the end, you discover that there is nothing wrong with you except the fact that you were trying to look for something that was not appropriate for you. So this is something that I regret having done. I have to say that I liked the job position I had, so I don't regret what I did, and I even don't regret the fact that I studied something which at the end didn't bring me to a professional career, because I didn't know it. You know, at the time I didn't have it's easy to think back in the past with the knowledge of today, but you have to be at the right moment. So I think one thing which I absolutely do not regret, and I would advise you, actually, it's not a regret, but actually something that I am proud of, and I think it was really valuable. Try to do what you like. Because if you do what you like, no matter which position you will find, if you like your job, if you wake up in the morning, you go to your office, to your lab, to your position, whatever, and you like it. So it's not something, oh, it's Monday, I have 5 days of work. Then you will work with pleasure and you will work well. So this is something that I would advise. So if you want to turn it around, don't do something you know that you don't like, because you will not even be good in doing it.
Yes, and I think this is really the red line of our discussion today, that basically you need to focus on what is right for you, what you really like. You don't need to stress and look for any job, because in the end, first of all, it will be difficult for you to stand out from the crowd. And even if you get the job, you will probably want to run away as soon as possible. So in the end, the right thing to do is indeed to maybe send a little less applications, but doing them right and focusing on what really is dear to your heart, what you really want to do. And I think this is very important to keep in mind, and especially in a moment like this, when indeed the market is a bit slower than usual, it's important to be aware that in the end, it's mostly about you, about what you want to do with your life. And if you find the right match, it will be easier to get the position, and it will be much more pleasant to actually work from Monday to Friday. There is one more question that I find very interesting from Anastasia Safargalieva, who is asking us, do you know examples of people who got back in academia after having worked in business for years? Do you think it's possible, or is it an exception?
No. Yes, I do. It is possible. Actually, I think in the future will happen more and more. And actually, it's a very positive thing. It's a very positive thing because it's bringing the business experience to academia. And one of the biggest points that is changing, and it's getting more and more, is the collaboration between business and academia. And also having business people going back to academia, bringing their own experience, helping, shaping the programs, the curricula in a different way. It's absolutely something that is already happening right now and will happen more in the future. The idea of academia as a completely isolated reality from society, from the business world, is something of the past. It's not like that already right now, and it will not be like that in the future.
Yes, I agree, and it's a very interesting thing to keep in mind also that, I mean, if you choose to go into academia, is not something you choose for life, and the same applies the other way around. You can always change your mind or change direction, as you proved also in your personal experience, I would like to say. We still have some questions, but it's already past 8, so I don't really want to abuse your time and that of our audience. So I don't know if you have any closing thoughts you would like to give us.
But just like maybe a very simple simple recommendation for I think the majority of the people in our audience are young people who are entering right now in the world of market and in the world of work, and they are doing it in a very complicated and in a very uncertain moment on what's going on to happen in the future. But my advice and my last thought is really don't lose hope and don't lose trust in yourself. Be sure of who you are, your qualities, what you want to do, and the benefit you can bring not only to the company where you will work, but the benefit you will bring to the society, what you will do as an individual. And try to do that remembering that it should be something that you also like. So that would be, for me, the most important advice based on what I did, what I'm doing in my personal life. I mean, the fact that I'm here speaking with you tonight at 8 o'clock after I've worked, this has nothing to do with my work. It's because it's a pleasure for me, because I think that this is something that I like doing it, but it's also something useful, hopefully, for you. You might think that I've just said whatever, but I hope that somebody of you find interesting the share of my experience and could be useful for your future. So let me finish by thanking once more Marco for a very nice way of conducting the interview, and also garagErasmus for a very, very interesting initiatives. And I'm sure that all the others will be as successful as this one, even better probably. You might even have better experiences shared by the other participants. So thank you very much. And Marco, the floor is yours to close if you want.
Thank you, Giorgio. What I can tell you for sure is that it's been very interesting for me to hear about your story and your insights. So I'm sure it's been very useful also for our audience. It's been a great pleasure to talk with you tonight. I think we had some very interesting insights that apply in general for someone who wants to start a career, regardless of their field of interest, but also some very good insights on how to focus on NGOs or the higher education sector. So thank you very much again for being with us tonight, and thank you for all our followers and our audience. We'll be happy to be again with you tomorrow for new sessions. And have a nice evening or day or night or whatever it is, wherever you are. Thank you very much, and see you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.